armed and well-trained fighters at his disposal, and he still has the remnants of an air force. So what is going to happen next? There's a touch of apprehension.
Indeed, and because of course the people in Benghazi have been the victims in the past. They've been on the wrong end of Gaddafi's henchmen in the past, haven't they?
Yes, they have suffered a lot. In 1996 there was an uprising, 1,200 people were killed in that. So they do have a history of objecting to the government. And actually it's been quite a surprise coming in here and finding out the extent of the torture and the oppression here, because in the last few days people have been telling us their stories about how they've been arrested and tortured in prison, how people have been disappeared. One of the big questions that many people are asking is, where are the bodies? They want to know where the people who've been taken away for whatever reason. They've been killed, obviously, and they've disappeared. So they're either down a well, been buried, or dropped at sea. They don't know. This is one of the most important things that you want to find out. Where are the bodies?
And clearly plenty of revolutionary fervour there still going on several days into their uprising. But what have they got in practical terms if Gaddafi does hit out at them again?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. It's very loud here. So,
sorry, Tony. I was just asking.
That, please?
Yeah, I was just asking you how much equipment they have or military expertise they have if they do come under fire again from Gaddafi.
Well, we don't know the full extent. What we're seeing actually are a few antiquated anti-aircraft guns and some tanks and some armoured vehicles which we see around the square here. The extent of their true arsenal we don't know. We don't know their true plans. We do know that there's some generals, some of them in exile and some are here, who are coordinating the military aspects. But the message that I'm getting over and over again is they're hoping that Gaddafi will go peacefully. They don't want to use the military scenario because too many people will die. But they will if they have to, and they believe at the end of the day that maybe that will be the course they'll have to take.
OK, Tony, thank you very much indeed. Tony Bertley reporting there from the main stronghold of the anti-Gaddafi movement in Benghazi. Let's go to James Bays, who's at Ras Ajdir at the Tunisian-Libyan border. So, James, there have been some chaotic scenes. Bring us up to date with what's happening there now.
Well, a little bit more order, but I think it is fair to describe this still as chaotic. We've seen problems growing here in recent days as the number of people in that crowd has grown. And I think the system here now has probably moved to a situation of almost breaking point. Earlier on, we saw people being pulled out of that crowd who had collapsed in the crowd. They'd fainted, some of them dehydrated because they've been in that crowd for so long. Very stressful experience, they described to us, after days making it to this border, then being stuck in this mass of people. You can perhaps see things being thrown into the crowd. That's not any sort of abuse. Actually, what they're throwing them is from the World Food Programme. They're these high-energy biscuits. That's the only way people are getting food and water at the moment. The other side, or one of the only ways, is from supplies that are being chucked into this massive crowd by the aid workers here. I have to tell you, it's not just aid workers here, though. There are soldiers here and there are local residents from this area. They have clubs and they are beating people back. They're only allowing a small number to cross each hour because the Tunisian authorities are worried about being overwhelmed by people. So those that try to climb over the wall have been beaten back. They're now putting up barbed wire along the wall here as well, Lauren.
And James, I know it might be quite difficult to work out what's happening on the other side of the border, but do you know who's in control and what the situation is on the Libyan side of where you are?
Yes, we've spoken to those that are passing through. They say the border crossing is still very much under the control of Gaddafi forces, but they have control of that border crossing right now. OK, James, thank you very much indeed for that update there. And it's surprising because it did look as though people were throwing missiles, but it was just energy biscuits. So thanks very much, James, for that update there. Let's go straight to that Foreign Affairs Select Committee, where we understand that Hillary Clinton is about to speak.
Transition to a more stable and democratic future must forever guide us. Pakistan must also do more to meet the pressing United States concerns, including the release of Raymond Davis, our detained American diplomat, and shifting its approach to Afghanistan away from armed proxies and toward constructive and legitimate political partners. And we must make those decisions in light of the unfortunate fiscal realities facing our government and every American family. Those who complain about diminished levels of international affairs funding need to ask themselves how much less would an insolvent United States of America be able to do. Our funding baseline has to change. The real question
we'll just
is not...
leave that Foreign Affairs Select Committee there in Washington, where we're expecting US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to speak later. We'll obviously go back to it when she appears. That's the view from Washington there. Let's get the latest European reactions to events in Libya from Stephen Cole in London. Stephen?
Lauren, thank you. While talks are going on between NATO and EU leaders on a coordinated approach, there are, of course, diverging views on Libya. British Prime Minister David Cameron has been repeating his view of some kind of military intervention, and a no-fly zone could be an option. Well, let's have a look at an option now, because British nationals in Libya are being urged to go to Benghazi to meet up with HMS York. Now, its deployment, HMS York's deployment, comes as Britain and others are looking at possible military intervention in Libya, including a no-fly zone. Now, that was discussed in Cabinet this morning. So, Alan Fisher in Downing Street, what did Mr Cameron have to say?
Well, he's been meeting Hamid Karzai here at Downing Street. It's unusual that when he's in town, Afghanistan isn't top of the agenda. In fact, what has been dominating discussions here is the Middle East and Libya in particular. In the last few hours, David Cameron has been holding a meeting of the UK National Security Council. That obviously has members of the armed forces, the intelligence services, and also the defence, foreign and international development ministers all around the table. They were talking, first of all, about what they could do about the Britons who are still trapped in Libya, how they could get them out. There's only a few of them, they think. And then the next stage in the process. We're hearing from James and from the United Nations that there is an impending humanitarian disaster, and so Britain wants to play its part by putting tents and medical aid posts at both the Libyan and the Egyptian border, and also the one that Libya shares with Tunisia too. But also they were discussing the possibility of taking some sort of military action to stop Colonel Gaddafi doing what he's doing. David Cameron said in a news conference just over an hour ago that nothing was off the table.
We have to plan for every eventuality. It is not acceptable to have a situation where Colonel Gaddafi can be murdering his own people, using aeroplanes and helicopter gunships and the like, and we have to plan now to make sure if that happens we can do something to stop it. And that's why I've said it's right for us to plan and look at plans for a no-fly zone, and that's why I've asked the Chief of the Defence Staff to do that. And yes, we should also be making contact with, getting a greater understanding of the opposition forces that are now in Benghazi and in control of quite a lot of the country. And we're trying to step up our contact with them so we can get to know them better and what their intentions are.
So the question is, what is being done, Alan?
Well, there are a number of options that they do have in front of them. Of course, the no-fly zone is the one that everyone's talking about. Now, Britain may have problems with that because the nearest base they have is Cyprus. That's some considerable distance away, so Italy would be the natural home for them. They have no aircraft carrier that can move into the region. They're also talking about possibly arming rebels. That's something that David Cameron mentioned in the British House of Commons just over 24 hours ago, and he said that that is still a possibility, although there are real concerns about who would get the arms, who that would then move on to. And then there is the possibility of military intervention somewhere. Perhaps that means selective